The day Cole Maddox rode into Whitmore Valley, every dog in town went quiet. Men stopped talking outside the general store. Women pulled their children closer. Even the blacksmith, a man who had once faced 3 outlaws with nothing but a hammer in his hand, stepped away from the street and watched the rider pass. Cole Maddox had that effect on people. He was 42, broad-shouldered, weathered by years beneath the frontier sun, with a dark hat pulled low over eyes that rarely revealed what he was thinking. Folks said he had stared down gunmen, broken cattle thieves, and walked away from more trouble than any man had a right to survive. Some called him a killer. Others called him a devil. But nobody in Whitmore Valley called him harmless. And that morning, he was riding toward the one place where nobody expected him to go: Whitmore Ranch. 3 miles beyond town, Clara Whitmore was standing beside a broken fence post, with dirt beneath her fingernails and exhaustion in her eyes. Her husband had been dead for 6 months. Since then, the ranch had seemed determined to die with him. 2 horses were gone. The western pasture fence needed replacing. The roof leaked whenever the clouds gathered over the mountains. And the small store in town had stopped extending her credit. Clara had sold her wedding silver, then her husband's pocket watch. Now there was almost nothing left. Still, every morning, she rose before sunrise. She fed the chickens. She checked the well. She mended fences. And she kept telling herself the same thing her husband used to say whenever life became difficult: land remembers who refuses to abandon it. That afternoon, Clara heard hoofbeats. She looked toward the road. One rider, dark horse, black hat. Her stomach tightened. She knew that silhouette. Everyone did. Cole Maddox stopped outside her gate. He didn't dismount immediately. For several seconds, he simply looked over the ranch. Then his gaze settled on Clara. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice was low. Clara wiped her hands on her worn brown skirt. "Mr. Maddox." He finally climbed down from his horse. He approached the porch without hurry, his boots pressing into the dry earth. Clara remained where she was. Most people would have stepped inside. She didn't. Cole stopped several feet away. "You need to leave this place." Clara stared at him. For a moment, she wondered if grief had finally made her hear things that weren't there. "What did you say?" "You heard me." His expression didn't change. "This ranch isn't safe anymore." Clara folded her arms. "And you're here to make it safer?" "No." The answer came so quickly that she almost laughed. "Then why are you here?" Cole looked toward the mountains. "Because someone wants you gone." Clara's eyes narrowed. "That someone isn't you." Cole said nothing. The silence told her enough. She stepped down from the porch. "My husband built this ranch with his own hands. I know. He died here. I know. And now you ride onto my property and tell me to abandon it?" "Yes." Clara walked closer. She was 5'6", exhausted, grieving, and standing in front of a man the entire valley feared. But she didn't lower her eyes. "I won't." Cole's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Whitmore." "No." She pointed toward the road. "You can frighten the men in town. You can make grown ranchers forget how to speak. But you don't own this land." Cole studied her. Something changed in his eyes. Not anger. Something closer to surprise. Perhaps everyone had told him Clara Whitmore was a frightened widow, waiting for someone stronger to take control. But the woman standing before him didn't look frightened. She looked tired. There was a difference. Cole stepped closer. "You think I'm trying to take your ranch, aren't you?" "No." "Then what do you want?" For the first time, Cole hesitated. His eyes moved past her toward the barn, then toward the tree line, then back to Clara. "I want you alive." The words landed heavier than any threat. Before Clara could answer, Cole turned toward his horse. He had taken only 3 steps when he stopped. His entire body went still. Clara noticed it immediately. "What is it?" Cole didn't answer. He was staring toward the far edge of the property. At first, Clara saw nothing. Then she noticed the grass moving. Not from the wind. Someone, or something, had been standing behind the trees, watching them. Cole's hand slowly moved toward the gun at his hip. And when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Clara. He had never called her by her first name before. Get inside. She looked toward the trees. What did you see? Cole's eyes hardened. Someone has been watching this ranch. Then he drew his revolver. And Clara realized the most feared cowboy on the frontier hadn't come to threaten her. He had come because the danger had already arrived. Cole Maddox stood with his revolver drawn, staring toward the trees. Clara didn't move. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. The wind passed through the cottonwoods, carrying the dry smell of dust and sage. Somewhere behind the barn, a loose piece of tin tapped against the roof. But there was no one in the trees. At least, no one they could see. Cole finally lowered his revolver. Go inside. Clara shook her head. You said someone was watching me. I want to know who. You don't. I think I do. Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he walked toward the tree line. Clara followed. Stay behind me. I've been taking care of this ranch alone for 6 months. Cole glanced over his shoulder. And you've been lucky for 6 months. She didn't appreciate that answer. Still, she stayed close. They reached the trees. There were footprints in the soft earth. Fresh ones. Boot prints. Cole crouched and studied them. One man, he said. How can you tell? 2 different sizes would mean more than one. Clara looked down. The tracks disappeared behind the trees. Cole followed them for nearly 50 yards before stopping beside a fallen cottonwood. Something was caught beneath one of its branches. A strip of dark cloth. Cole pulled it free. Clara recognized it immediately. That's not yours? No. Cole turned the cloth over in his hand. There was a small brass button sewn into it. Clara's face changed. My husband had a coat with buttons like that. Cole looked at her. Are you sure? I sewed them on myself. The cowboy's expression hardened. Then we have a problem. Before Clara could ask what he meant, a gunshot cracked across the valley. The bullet struck the tree beside Cole's shoulder. Clara screamed. Cole grabbed her and pulled her behind the fallen trunk. Another shot echoed. Then silence. Cole waited. He didn't chase the shooter. Instead, he looked at Clara. Stay here. No. Clara, I'm not hiding while someone shoots at my property. For the first time, there was something almost like frustration in his eyes. You are stubborn! So I've been told. A faint smile almost appeared on his face. Almost. Then it disappeared. Cole rose carefully and moved through the trees. Minutes passed. When he returned, the shooter was gone. But he carried something. A spent cartridge. He handed it to Clara. This came from an old Winchester. She stared at it. My husband owned a Winchester. So do half the men in the territory. Clara looked up. Then why are you worried? Cole didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the ranch. Because your husband was worried before he died. Clara froze. What do you mean? Cole's eyes remained fixed on the house. He came to see me 3 weeks before his death. The world seemed to stop. My husband never told me that. I know. What did he want? Cole hesitated. He asked me what I'd do if someone tried to take something from him. Clara swallowed. And what did you tell him? Fight. She waited. But he didn't tell me what he was protecting. That night, Cole refused to leave the ranch. He slept beside the barn with his saddle beneath his head, his revolver within reach. Clara stayed awake inside the house. She couldn't stop thinking about the cloth, the button, the gunshot, and the fact that her husband had secretly visited the most feared cowboy in the valley before he died. Near midnight, Clara heard footsteps. She reached for the lamp. Cole stood in the doorway. Someone's outside. Her heart jumped. Again? He nodded. Stay here. This time she obeyed. Cole disappeared into the darkness. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a weathered wooden box. He placed it on the kitchen table. I found this beneath the loose floorboard in your barn. Clara stared at it. There was a small brass lock on the front. Her hands trembled. "I've never seen that before. I believe your husband hid it. What's inside?" Cole looked at her. "That's what we're going to find out." Clara opened the box. Inside were several old papers, a folded map, and a letter sealed with faded red wax. Her husband's handwriting was unmistakable. Clara touched the envelope. Then she saw the first line. Her husband's name was written across the top, but beneath it were 6 words that made the blood drain from her face. "If Clara is reading this, I'm dead." She looked at Cole, and for the first time since he had arrived, the feared cowboy looked genuinely afraid. Because whatever Clara's husband had discovered before his death, someone was willing to kill again to keep it buried. Clara could barely breathe. The letter remained open beneath the lamplight, her husband's handwriting staring back at her like a voice from 6 months in the grave. "If Clara is reading this, I'm dead." She read the sentence again. Then again. Cole stood across the table, silent. The man who had frightened an entire valley looked as though he already knew what the letter might contain. Clara slowly lifted her eyes. "You knew?" Cole shook his head. "I knew your husband was afraid. I didn't know why." "Then why did you come here?" "Because 3 men came looking for this ranch after he died." Clara's fingers tightened around the paper. "Who?" Cole's jaw hardened. Elias Whitmore was one of them, her husband's brother. Clara stared at him. "Elias told me he was trying to help. He wasn't." Cole reached toward the map inside the box. "Your husband marked something here." He unfolded it carefully across the table. It showed the ranch, the creek, the northern pasture, and the mountains beyond. But beneath the map, Daniel had drawn a small circle around a narrow stretch of land near the old barn. Clara frowned. "There's nothing there." Cole pointed to a faded mark. "There's supposed to be." "What?" "A spring." Clara looked confused. "We have a well. Your husband wasn't talking about the well." Cole traced the map with his finger. He found something underground. Clara remembered Daniel coming home late at night during the final weeks of his life. She remembered the dirt beneath his fingernails and the way he would stop talking whenever she entered the room. She had thought it was grief. Now she wondered if it had been fear. Before Clara could say anything, 3 hard knocks struck the front door. Both of them froze. Cole reached for his revolver. Clara whispered, "Who is it?" A familiar voice answered. "Clara, it's Elias." Cole's expression became cold. "Don't open it." Clara stared at the door. Her husband's brother had never visited this late. Elias knocked again. "Clara, we need to talk." Cole stepped toward the window and looked outside. He brought 2 men. Her heart sank. "Why?" "Because he doesn't want to talk." Clara looked at the letter, then at the map, then at Cole. "What do we do?" Cole's voice was quiet. "We let him think we don't know anything." The next morning, Clara rode into town with Cole. By sunrise, whispers had already spread. The widow had been seen riding beside Cole Maddox. People watched from porches as the two passed. But Clara barely noticed. She had something more important on her mind. They stopped outside the sheriff's office. Sheriff Nathan Briggs stepped onto the porch. He looked from Clara to Cole. "I wondered when you'd finally tell her." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Tell me what?" Nathan sighed. "Your husband's death was investigated as an accident." "I know." "No." The sheriff shook his head. "It was investigated that way because nobody wanted to investigate anything else." Clara stepped closer. "What are you saying?" Nathan glanced at Cole. "Daniel came to me 2 days before he died." Clara's voice trembled. "What did he say?" "He said someone was trying to force him off the ranch." "Did he name them?" Nathan hesitated. Then he nodded. "Elias." The word struck Clara harder than she expected. But before she could respond, an old man emerged from the general store. Samuel Reed, 74 years old, bent slightly with age, but still sharp-eyed. He walked directly toward Clara. "I knew your husband," he said. Clara swallowed. "Did you know about the spring?" Samuel's face changed. He looked at Cole, then at Nathan. Finally, he lowered his voice. That spring isn't the only thing buried beneath your ranch. Clara felt a chill move through her. What else is there? Samuel glanced toward the road. Proof. Proof of what? Who really owned the land before your husband? Cole stepped forward. Samuel. The old rancher shook his head. It's time she knows. He told Clara that years earlier, before Daniel bought the ranch, a group of investors had secretly surveyed the valley. They believed valuable water rights ran beneath the Whitmore property. But Daniel had discovered something they didn't expect. The original land records had been altered. Someone had stolen the true deed, and whoever controlled the ranch could control the water for miles around. Clara looked at Cole. That's why they want me gone. Cole nodded. Yes. And Elias? He's working for them. Suddenly, the sound of approaching horses filled the street. Everyone turned. Elias Whitmore rode toward them with 2 armed men behind him. He dismounted slowly. In his hand was a leather folder. He smiled at Clara. Good morning. Then he held up the papers. I believe it's time you stopped pretending this ranch belongs to you. Clara stared at the documents. Cole stepped beside her. But before either of them spoke, Elias smiled wider. Because according to these papers, your husband never legally owned the land. Clara's heart sank. Elias opened the folder, and the first page carried an official seal. For the first time, Clara wondered if the ranch she had spent 6 months fighting to save had ever legally belonged to her at all. If you've been following Clara and Cole's story, stay with us, because the truth they've been chasing is about to become impossible to hide. And Elias had no idea that Cole Maddox already knew where the original deed was hidden. Elias held the papers high enough for everyone on the street to see. Clara stared at the official seal. For 6 months, she had fought to keep her husband's ranch alive. She had sold nearly everything she owned. She had worked until her hands cracked. She had endured whispers that a woman alone couldn't hold a piece of frontier land. And now Elias stood before her, claiming it had never belonged to her at all. He smiled. You should have listened when I offered to help you. Clara looked at him. Then she looked at Cole. The feared cowboy wasn't watching Elias. He was watching her, waiting. Clara straightened her shoulders. No. Elias frowned. No? You heard me. She stepped toward him. I don't care what those papers say. A few townspeople gathered closer. Elias laughed softly. You don't get to decide what is legal. No, Clara answered, but I get to decide whether I believe you. Cole finally stepped forward. Elias. The smile disappeared from Elias's face. Cole reached inside his coat and removed a folded piece of parchment. You're holding a copy. Elias went still. This, Cole continued, is the original. The street fell silent. Clara stared at the document. Cole handed it to Sheriff Nathan Briggs. Nathan unfolded it carefully. His eyes moved across the page. Then his expression hardened. This is the original Whitmore deed. Elias took a step backward. That's impossible. No, Nathan said. What's impossible is how your version carries a seal that wasn't issued until 2 years after Daniel purchased the property. A murmur moved through the crowd. Elias looked toward the 2 men who had accompanied him. Tell them. Neither man spoke. Cole's voice remained calm. You paid them to lie. Elias reached for his revolver. Cole's hand moved faster, but Clara stepped between them. Don't. Cole looked at her. She shook her head. Not for him. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sheriff Nathan drew his own weapon. Elias Whitmore, you're under arrest. Elias looked around desperately. The same townspeople who had once feared Cole now watched him with disgust. He finally lowered his hand. As Nathan placed the cuffs around his wrists, Elias whispered to Clara, Your husband was a fool. Clara's eyes hardened. No. She looked toward the ranch in the distance. He was brave. Elias was taken away, but the truth about Daniel's death still remained. Samuel stepped forward. There's something else you need to know. Clara turned. Samuel looked ashamed. Daniel discovered the altered records before he died. He came to me because he wanted someone to protect you if anything happened. Clara's voice broke. Did he know he was going to die? Samuel lowered his eyes. I think he suspected. Cole looked toward the mountains. He asked me to protect the ranch. Clara turned to him. You've been doing that ever since. Cole nodded. From a distance. Why? Cole looked at her for a long moment. Because your husband trusted me. Clara swallowed. And now? Cole glanced toward his horse. Now you don't need me anymore. He walked away. Clara followed him. Cole, he stopped. You saved my ranch. You saved it yourself. You found the deed. Daniel hid it. I only found where he told me to look. She stepped closer. You protected me. Cole looked down. I promised your husband. And if he hadn't asked? Cole was silent. Clara understood. She smiled faintly. You would have protected me anyway. He didn't deny it. The feared cowboy looked almost uncomfortable beneath her gaze. I don't belong here, Clara. She shook her head. You don't get to decide that either. Cole looked at her. She took his hand. The whole valley had called him dangerous. A man to fear. A man nobody dared challenge. But Clara had never bowed to him. Not once. She had looked into the eyes of the frontier's most feared cowboy and seen something nobody else had bothered to see. A lonely man carrying too many ghosts. You said you wanted me alive, she whispered. I do. Then stay. Cole's eyes softened. I don't know how to stay. Clara smiled through the tears in her eyes. Neither did I. For the first time in years, Cole Maddox smiled. Not the cold smile people whispered about. A real one. Behind them, the Whitmore Ranch stood beneath the morning sun. The fences were still broken. The roof still leaked. The fields still needed work, but the ranch was theirs. And so, perhaps, was the future. Clara had entered that year as a widow everyone expected to surrender. She ended it standing beside the man everyone else was afraid to approach. She never bowed to Cole Maddox. She never needed to. Because love, Clara learned, was never about finding someone powerful enough to command you. It was about finding someone who would stand beside you when the whole frontier told you to kneel. And from that day forward, whenever people in Whitmore Valley spoke about the widow who refused to bow, they told the story with a smile. Because they remembered the cowboy who arrived at her door expecting to frighten her away. And they remembered the woman who looked him in the eyes and said no. If you enjoyed Clara and Cole's journey, subscribe for more emotional frontier stories, and join us again for another tale of courage, mystery, and unexpected love beneath the wide western sky.